today, but also as a recording for. It's good remember it, yeah. So if you later on, if you want to catch up and listen to what we said yesterday, then you'll be able to. The text that we are following a text for a change, which is a good thing. And this text, I'm sure you all know about it, but it's the root verses of the 6 Bardos. And yesterday we went through the first 3, which is the Bardo of life, which is the one we know best. Then the Bardo of dreams and the Bardo of meditation, which sometimes are considered, this is just considered as one, the Bardo of life, within which we have the normal awakened state, like awakened in the sense, not in the Buddhist sense of enlightenment, but awakened in the sense that when we are not asleep. And then the Bardo of dreams and the Bardo of meditation, which all of these actually Bardos, is the idea is that our consciousness and the relation with our consciousness and our body goes through different stages or phases in the cycle of life and death. And we all agree and understand that the dreaming state is different from the awakened state when we are like now. In our dreams, we certainly have experiences, but they have there's a different, they're experienced in a different way. And so is meditation. And we're talking about deeper levels of meditation where we have also different experiences from the ones we have when we are awakened. So that's why those 2 states of consciousness are sometimes referred to as different Bardos. And as you know, and as I said, it can be, we can categorize Bardos into 4 categories or into 6. And when we categorize into 6, then we add the Bardo of dreams and the Bardo of meditation, which otherwise are all part of the Bardo of life. Okay, so we went through these first 3, and now we come to the section of the Bardo of dying. And in this specific text, which is a prayer, it is set as a prayer. This section of on the Bardo of dying says as follows: Kiema, now when the Bardo of dying is dawning upon me, I will abandon all grasping, yearning, and attachment, enter undistracted, a state in which the instructions are clear, and transfer my own awareness into the sphere of unborn space. I am about to leave this compound body of flesh and blood. I will know it to be a transitory illusion. Okay, so what it refers here is more to the practice of poa, or the transfer of the consciousness, which is again a whole teaching and a whole training on the idea in Buddhism. I mean, I'm sure you all know, but I don't know what you know and what you don't. So in Buddhism, we have this idea that the consciousness and the body are interacting while we are alive, and in a very close way. The sense organs and all the faculties are connected with our physical sense organs, are connected with different levels of consciousness and so on. So when we are alive, the connection between the body and the consciousness is so intricate that you can work on the consciousness through the body and vice versa. And if you get very stressed mentally, it will reflect on your body. If you get very relaxed physically or very stressed, it will reflect on our mind. So that's how intricate it is. It's sometimes even difficult to say, has it started in the body or has it started in the mind? But at the moment of death, that changes. And according to the Buddhist point of view, there's a point where the body, the physical elements of the body cannot sustain the mind anymore. And that's where what we call dissolutions in the bardo of dying, in the process of dying, happen. But before we go into that part, there is this teaching in Tibetan Buddhism called Poa. And Poa means transfer, or so the idea is that at the moment of death, the consciousness leaves the body. And first there is all this disconnecting from the physical part from the consciousness part. And then the consciousness leaves the body, and it will happen anyway. But if we are trained in Poa, we can sort of transfer our consciousness or make it go a certain way or make it leave in a certain way. And here what is explained is what is not explained, but what we wish for in this prayer, because it's a prayer, so we're making wishes, is that we are able to sort of transfer our consciousness by resting in the nature of mind. Actually, if you read the whole text, it is about that in all phases. It's about resting in the nature of mind. But in this case, we sometimes hear the Poa about transferring the mind to some pure land or something like this. But here it goes directly into the highest level, which is just that our mind dissolves into this spaciousness of the natural awareness of the mind, and that is the sort of the supreme Poa. But that's a whole teaching, and I don't think we're going to go through that. I'm not qualified to speak about it. I don't have experience in the Poa, or not much. I've done it a few times, but it's not enough to speak about it, and that's also another whole story. So, and in a sense, it can be very technical and it can be very simple. If we, I think sometimes we might even have the experience of these high levels of meditation and not even being aware of it. As I said yesterday, those experiences can happen to any of us for a brief moment. And sometimes it's so brief that we don't really recognize it. And it's not that bad, actually, because if we do, then we make it a thing and it becomes much more conceptual. So it can happen naturally if we just, by the fact that we are about to die, and if we really manage, and that's what this stanza is about, is how just by abandon the grasping and the grasping to the solidity of the world, the grasping and the attachment to our habits and our references and our loved ones and all of that. If we can really, if we are lucky and we don't die suddenly, let's say, or at least unprepared, we might die suddenly, but if we're prepared, that's okay. But if we die suddenly and we are not prepared, by prepared, I mean having considered, first of all, being trained, being trained in meditation, for instance, and in any practice of the mind of the Buddhist path, since that's we're talking about, can be from another path also, no problem. But it will, anyway, unless we are really at a very high level, it will always help to know that we are about to die, because then we have time to sort of prepare ourselves And by preparing, I mean getting, I wouldn't say getting rid necessarily, but at least getting, letting go of our things, and especially the things that we like a lot or that mean a lot to us, letting go of the people, of the status, of whatever we are holding on to. And that is what we identify ourselves with. Because by then, if we can let go, that's what I mean, among other things, that's what I mean by being prepared. So if we have, and I think this is, when I think about my own death, I often think, I hope it comes quickly, but not too quickly. Quickly enough so that I don't linger, in a bed for years, but not too quickly that didn't have the time to get everything prepared. So I don't have a timeline, but I often wish it to, when the time comes, it comes quickly, but not too quickly. And of course, we can't just be prepared in the last fortnight or something. We need to prepare now, in a sense, by, interestingly, as we grow older, we tend to have more things than we had when we were younger. And actually, it should be the opposite. We should be, at a certain point in our lives, we should start letting go of many things. And perhaps, well, I can't speak, this is my case, but even, move into a smaller space. So, you have to get rid of many things. It doesn't really matter, actually, that you have or you don't have, but at least mentally start, giving away and things like this. I remember my mother, she wasn't a Buddhist, but in the late years, when she was over 80, she started giving away the things that she liked the most, the jewels my father had given her and things like that. And then she would ask me if I was okay if she gave this ring to this person or that brooch to that person. And I said, they're yours, so you decide, But I thought it was so wise, because, those things that really matter to us, and it's not because they're valuable or they're gold or whatever, but if they have a sentimental value to us, we would wish that they are sort of given or used by people who will value them. And she knew I wasn't into jewelry, so it would pointless to give it to me. I wouldn't wear it, or I mean, I might value it because it came from my parents, but other than that, So things like this, I think it's important for us. What if we don't care about anything, then we don't have to do anything. But if we do, as we grow older, I think it's and we have time ahead of us, because if you have to move from one place to the other and you have a deadline, you might and you have to go through all the things that are accumulated in the storage place or in the attic or something, and you are into a rush. You then might put everything in the trash or something because you have to, but you will regret. Whereas if you have time, you can sort things out, and give away things that you would like, that they are good and they can be helpful for some people and things like that. I think we should start thinking about that always, but especially when we grow older, because after that, when you're gone, it's your poor family that will have to go through all of that. And then even things that you like a lot, it could be useful to other people, will end up in the trash because they won't value them as we do. So it's a good thing to do that sort of thing. And that helps with the letting go. some of us are more attached to things, other of us are not. But for those who are, then, going through all our belongings and disposing of them and letting go of all these things, it's a good thing, because it's maybe just things, but in a sense it's all memories. Why don't we throw away the postcard that our son sent us on his 15th birthday like 50 years ago or something? It's not because of the postcard in itself, it's the memory. It's because we are fond of those things that happened in the past, and being able to get rid of it or to burn it or something, giving a nice dignified ending, putting a nice dignified ending to that thing, will help also, letting go of the attachment to the situation or to the memory or to the person or things like that. So being prepared to die doesn't happen just in the last 15 days. It's something that we can start now, whatever our age is, because there's no deadline to literally. We don't know when it's going to happen. And we also don't know if we will have time in the end, because we might die very suddenly. And so it's better we are at least a little bit prepared for that. Because in the end, when the process of dying starts, if you go through all the dissolutions, which I'm sure all of you went, we can go through it a little bit afterwards. There is nothing scary about any of it. It's just different experiences, which in themselves, they're not scary. Besides, we experience them every day when we fall asleep. And we're still here. So there's nothing too scary about it. It's the fact of letting go that is difficult. It's not the going in itself. It's letting go. I was reading this wonderful book, Mingyur Rinpoche's wonderful book, the latest, called In Love with the World. I don't know if you read it. It's very beautiful. And there's a place where there's a moment where he says, my father used to tell me, what will you do in the Bardo? And he said, I had never really put too much attention into it. But when he went in this sort of retreat in the world, he thought about it again, because when he was facing his anxiety, his panic attacks, and coming from an extremely protected situation where he had never been alone anywhere outside the monastery, of course, except in his room, and even that, when tulkus were so protected that often they had an attendant sleeping with them, sleeping in the same room, so they would never be alone. And then he went all by himself, so brave. And he was saying, when I decided to put myself through this, I was thinking about my father and what he said, what will you do in the Bardo? Because it's not about the Bardo being a very frightening place necessarily. It's about letting go of everything at the same time, everything that is familiar. We know how difficult it is, a divorce, for instance, or a very close one that dies, or a change in our career. We suddenly get fired from a place, and that we know how difficult it is to cope with these big changes in our lives, but that's just one. Now imagine everything at the same time, the career, the loved ones, and then coming to the most intimate thing that we own, which is our body. So everything lets us down at the same time. So that's what we have to consider when we think about getting ready. It's this, it's about this. It's not about, the earth dissolving into the water. And that's all okay. We go through this every day. And if we do a nap, you do even twice a day. So that's not scary in itself. It's more the finding ourselves in a totally unfamiliar place. It is not really a place, but a totally unfamiliar experience where there's no time. There's no, at 5 o'clock I have this, or at 3 o'clock I have that. Then I will have my little cup of coffee, or there's no coffee. Then, it's the fact that all that punctuates our day falls apart at the same time. And I went through this experience as part of when I was in the 3 years retreat. People sometimes say, wasn't it difficult? Yeah, it was. Some days, like everything else, some days were okay, were even wonderful, and some days were hard. But I have to say the hardest thing I did during those 3 years was, at some point we were training in some Dzogchen. I can't even remember. It was so many years ago, like more than 30. But it was some sort of Dzogchen training or something, where for 3 whole days we couldn't do anything. That sounds okay, doesn't it? But when you're stuck with the whole 12 or 16 hours ahead of you, and you can't read a book, you can't go for a walk, you can't do a prayer, you can't do you can't do anything. You're supposed to just rest in the nature of your mind, which is this vast emptiness, and you get so antsy. What shall I do? And you're not supposed to do anything. Those are the 3 longest days of my life. It seemed, when it's about going, it's Friday evening, and you have the whole weekend ahead of you, and somebody asks you, so what are you going to do with your resting time? We all have plans, I'll go do this, and I watch a bit TV, or I read a book, but having 2 whole days without anything to do, really, that's quite challenging. So it might not sound like this, but it is. So that's what, the big challenge with this traversing this stage of the Bardos dying is to find yourself in a space where there is too much freedom. Everything is possible, but nothing is there. So it can become a bit scary. Again, it's not like some monster is going to eat us or something like that, but it's like it's too much emptiness. So if we have habituated ourselves to relaxing in the natural awareness of mind, and not the big difficulty with that is exactly the same. Is the moment a thought arises, we feel more comfortable following the thought than remaining in the openness. So that's the exact same thing that will happen in the Bardo. It sounds very easy. Okay, just do the poa and dissolve your consciousness in emptiness, and it probably is the simplest thing, except that we are more used to be in a cage than be in the open sky. Like the birds who were born in a cage, you might open the door, but they don't go out. So that's us. So that's why getting prepared to die is not, yes, if you read all the books about palliative care and things like this, they all say, yes, you should apologize to the people you hurt. And sure. But in terms of a Buddhist practitioner, that should be done every day, you shouldn't have to drag all these hurts and all these things all your life. So that's the basic. But then comes the other part where, you know, in order to really be be willing to let go of everything, to just approach this openness as an adventure, you know, then there's a need to get familiarized, and familiarized to the point that when you're resting in a more relaxed state of openness, and then suddenly a thought comes, you prefer to stay in the openness than follow the thought. You see what I mean? Generally, the only reason why we can't stay in the openness is because we prefer to follow the thought, because it's more familiar. And it refers to, a thought always refers to something, time, space, you know, all these references that our life is punctuated with. So we'd rather go there because it's familiar territory than remain in this openness, even if it's very comfortable for a second. And we feel more comfortable or more familiar. It might be it might even be a torture in a way. We know that we get tense as soon as a thought comes, and then it will eventually go into some place where we don't feel so comfortable about, but still, because it is familiar, we prefer to follow that than remaining in the openness. So that's why practicing meditation is the best way to actually prepare for this moment. If we have really prepared, then we can do the poa as it says here. We just let go of everything and enter that spaciousness of natural awareness like we used to do every day, and feel comfortable there. But at least we won't be so lost in the experience of too much freedom and not enough references. You know, everything is possible, but nothing is specifically there. So that is, I think, the most important thing. So sometimes it sounds a bit, when talk to people who are not Buddhist and they ask about how Buddhists approach death and things like this, and you say, yeah, well, a Buddhist practitioner, at least Tibetans would do that. They practice to prepare for death. That sounds so morbid to most people. But it's actually not that you're just preparing for that. We are preparing for life, you know, and within it, in all its shapes and, you know, forms, and like all the different 6 Bardos. When we meditate, we prepare to deal and recognize the nature of our own mind. So it will be with us always, whichever Bardo we are. So it's not specifically for death, even if death is a very important moment, because whether we were trained for it or not, we will all experience the clear light in the end of the dissolution process. And that's a very big opportunity. So better we are prepared for that, so that we can recognize it and then, you know, get some realization, so that we don't have to come back experiencing the same sufferings and the same delusions and the same thing again. So, you know, just to, I don't know if anybody has any questions before we go into the...
Yes, there's one question.
Yes.
About, which is, I think it's pretty general. When you say about resting your mind in the power, whatever it is, and that's in many meditation instructions, it is like that. Okay, so then you got this and that, and then you just sit and
rest
your mind, rest in this state of, and that's difficult kind of understand what it is, and when then you're like, maybe this is it, maybe no, maybe this, no, not this one, no, and then even sometimes you can even actually follow a thought, like you don't go along with, but you just notice a thought or feeling or whatever comes up and it goes, but still it's like, okay, and it's happening, you kind of you're aware of it, but then it gets very blurry and weird, and like I'm sitting here and I'm resting but not sleeping, and that's so many kind of pixels of details.
Of course. Yeah, and then again, that is because we can't just relax. It may sound repetitive to say this over and over again, but it's the truth. It is part of the habitual pattern of being always busy, that even when you're resting, then comes the thought, is it supposed to be like this, or no, I read that place that was like more like that, and it's also part of it. So what I found for myself is that whenever these thoughts come, I just say to myself, no, relax. You can check that afterwards, but right now you don't have to worry about that. Just relax. And I know how difficult it is, but it all has to do with the habitual tendency of being always busy and finding the thoughts much more entertaining than just relaxing. So I think we also have to, I remember hearing Khandro Rinpoche saying this, in the beginning it's not difficult to rest in that nature for a second, but it's difficult to sustain it. So in the beginning, you can't even recognize there's too much. Everything is blurred, and you can't even have a second of rest. But then with some training, as you practice more and more shamatha in a very simple, direct way. Sorry. I think I heard Ringo Tuku saying something like this. Makes a lot of sense. Doing shamatha just by focusing on the breathing, for instance, or the sounds or whatever, this very simple, very naked way of practicing shamatha is a very honest way of practicing shamatha, I find. As I said, I spent many years, I spent at least 3 years practicing in a retreat setting within the Tibetan Buddhism system. And in those days, the first lamas that came to the West and taught meditation would normally never teach simple shamatha. You would were immediately thrown into visualizations and deities and mantras and all of that. And I'm not saying it was good, but it was not in their tradition. Perhaps Tibetans didn't need it. No. But I realized afterwards that if you've never had any training in just the most simple form of shamatha, what happens is that then mantras and visualizations become like thoughts. It becomes a bit distracting. Your mind gets used to that, and instead of using it as a way to, of course, you still do it, but there's still a habit of, there is a sort of underlying flow of thoughts that can come and you don't see them because you are following, the rays of light and go and come and all of that. Many years after that, when I started doing the simple forms of shamatha, that's when I said, oh my goodness, how many thoughts have been there that I didn't detect, So when Rinpoche said sometime, that this sort of shamatha meditation was a very honest meditation, I can see his point, because you can't hide, the thoughts don't hide behind anything. You see them plainly, you see that you're, instead of focusing on the breath, you are actually following the thoughts. And I think it now I see lamas more and more, they start with that. And then you go into the Vajrayana. Not to say that it's not terrific. I think the Vajrayana methods are fabulous, but you need a little training into this awareness. So the way to go is actually just consistent with this sort of simple forms of shamatha. It's just using anything, whatever you want, as an object of reference point to bring your mind back. And bringing your mind back includes bringing it back from thoughts like, what shall I do tonight, as well as, is it exactly like this that I should be sitting? That's again a thought. So at the moment of when you are trying to meditate, you should bring your mind back, even from those thoughts that appear to be relevant, but are just thoughts. Then later on, if you really have a doubt, you should clarify, or maybe read or listen to a teaching or something. And at that specific moment, just try to relax. I know it sounds repetitive, and everybody says just relax, and sometimes it's not that easy. But in the end, that is the secret of all, you know?
Yeah, that's now you say this reference point, that you have some reference point like visual image or breath or whatever in a samatha meditation, but then there seems to be another level where you're doing basically the same thing without the reference point.
That also.
So
where are you resting?
Yeah, I don't know if it's well, it's probably more restful if you don't have reference point to bring your mind back into it again. But then the danger is that your mind goes like blurry, and then you just wake up and now 20 minutes passed, and I just don't know what.
I don't know what happened. Yeah, well, that is it. Not having a reference point means that you just remain in the awareness. You're just aware.
You're aware, yeah.
And again, it's the same thing. You just remain aware, but then whenever a thought comes, you are again faced with the same choice as before. Do I prefer remaining in the awareness, or will I follow? Of course, it's not consciously in your mind. It's just what attracts you the most, you know? It reminds me of that story of Nagarjuna. It's the whole story. I don't know if you know it. Maybe I'll tell it. Shall I? Okay, the story goes like this. Everybody knows Nagarjuna was a big yogi. He lived like a sadhu in India, barely wearing any clothes and living a very unconventional lifestyle. But he had been the abbot of Nalanda, so everybody knew him well. And he was living in a part of India where there was this kingdom, and the queen was very fond of him. So one day she invited him for a meal. So he came, and she was very happy. She did everything very well, presented lots of offerings and so on. And then she said, "You are such a great teacher. Can I ask you something?" I said, "Sure." She said, "Can you give me your alms bowl? Can you give it to me?" And he said, "Sure." He gave it to her. And then she said, "Oh, I'm so happy. I put it in my shrine," and things like this. And then she said, "Well, you're such an incredible teacher. You deserve something else, another." So she called somebody, and then he made for him an alms ball in gold and with diamonds or something like that. So, supposedly as a monk, he wasn't authorized to even accept it. But for him, clay or gold or whatever was the same, so he didn't have a problem with that. So he took it. So he goes out of the palace, and with this small, a totally naked guy with a golden diamond ball it's not truly inconspicuous. So there was these thieves going around, and there was one who spotted him and said, "Okay, I'll get you." So he started following Nagarjuna, and he was living in some ruins somewhere, and some temple, an old temple or something like that. So the thief followed him there. So he went in, and of course he was very aware that the thief was outside waiting for him to fall asleep to go in and rob him. So he didn't want to wait, Nagarjuna, so he just picked up the ball and threw it through the door. Because he said, "Okay, I want to sleep, and the guy is here, and it's preventing me to from falling asleep." But the thief outside sees the ball and realizes that, of course, Nagarjuna, the guy inside, had noticed him, so he knows that he is outside, and he understands that he threw the ball for him. So he thinks, "What a strange guy, He just gives it to me, something that many people would be wanting to die for, So he says, I really need to do something to go in and thank him. So he goes in and he thank Nagarjuna. And in India, in those days, that's where prostrations come from. It was very common when you really felt a lot of respect for somebody, you would put your forehead on the feet of that person. So he bows down to do that. And the moment he touches Nagarjuna, maybe Nagarjuna touched his head or something, he felt something really different, like a form of blessing or something. So he says, "Oh, you're such an incredible," he says to Nagarjuna, "You're such an incredible person. I would like to become like you. What can I do to become like you? I'm wasting my time. I'm wasting my life doing stupid things. How can I become like you?" And Nagarjuna says, "Oh, it's very easy. I can teach you how to do that." And he said, "Well, yeah, I'm not sure about that, because I've been asking to many teachers, and they all start by telling me you have to stop being a thief. And I can't do that. That's my way of life. And I'm a very well-known thief. The police never caught me. I have a reputation, So Nagarjuna says, "Oh, no, you don't have to stop anything. You can just go about your business. I don't have anything to do with that. It's just I can teach you how to lighten a lamp inside yourself, so you can start seeing things in a different way." And the thief is not really convinced, but he says, "You make it sound so simple. Are you sure?" "Yes, absolutely." So he teaches him how to meditate. And he says, "Now you just have to be aware all the time. If you eat, you are aware that you're eating. If you talk, you're aware that you're talking. If you decide to rob somebody, you're aware that you're going to rob that person. And when you're robbing him, you're aware that you're doing that," and so on and so forth. And says, "Can it be that simple?" "Yes, it's that simple." So he goes away. Then 2 weeks later, he comes back, and he's kind of transformed. Something in his demeanor is different. And he comes to Nagarjuna and he says, "Oh, you set me up. I've been doing what you told me to do, but now I'm in a big fix. I don't know what to do." And Nagarjuna said, "Why is that?" He says, "Well, I've learned how to be aware of everything. But the problem now is that if I'm aware, I cannot rob. And if I rob, I cannot be aware. So what shall I do?" Then Nagarjuna says, "Well, I don't know. You have to decide. If you prefer being aware and being at peace, then you should choose that. But if you find that robbing is much more important, then you choose that. It's up to you." And he's totally, you know, it says, well, the thing is, now that I have experienced the peace that comes with being aware, I cannot give it up. So I will have to choose, you know. So it becomes, of course, you know, the story. I mean, you get, I know you've guessed, it becomes Nagarjuna's disciple. But the interesting point of this story, there are many interesting points in this story, but one of them is that it is his decision. And in the moment when he really came up to being able to experience the relaxation that comes with just being aware, he had to choose that, you know, but it was his choice. So it's a bit like that too for us. The reason why we keep following the patterns is because we still feel more comfortable with them than just remaining in the awareness. But in the end, it's really a matter how comfortable we feel, you know, how, sorry. Actually, in a sense, purification is just losing the fascination for the thoughts. They're not necessarily going to disappear, but it's just that, I mean, okay, I've been thinking this for so long. What else can I do? You know what I mean? It's like we watch the same movie like 352 times. Why do I need to watch it again? You know, I know everything by heart. And so it's less and less appealing. And we enjoy more and more just being in this awareness, in this openness. But it won't come by itself. We have to, in a sense, it's our nature, but in a sense, we have to, it's more like, because we are not habituated to it, it has to become how can you say, an acquired taste.
A new habit.
Yeah, a new habit.
Yes.
And then as you become more and more familiar, it becomes more and more comfortable. And then in the end, it's not a problem. You will just automatically prefer to remain there than follow the thought. But it takes a long time.
And this Nagarjuna teaching, and this what you gave just now told, this was like the thief was given an option to be aware or not to be aware, which is like it's opening up a little bit more of that like conceptual thing, because for me, I had quite many years I did Zen meditation, and where I ended up was like for years and years, and I did it quite, you know, regularly and everything. And then I was just like, okay, we're doing this, I'm doing this, I'm still doing this, still doing, and nothing really happens. And then when I found like Tibetan teachings and this, and then it gave a whole new perspective to it. Nothing to say anything is wrong with Zen, but I remember they say that there are at least two different schools where there's some people say that you have to first do this counting breath, following breath, and then go this whole the koan, this kind of collection. And the other ones are just saying that you just start with doing just sitting, shikantasa, which is I read some Tibetan teachers are also referring, so you just sit, so you just relax. Some Zen teachers say that if we could do that, but most of you would be bored in 3 years and leave, because if we wouldn't do anything.
And that's very optimistic. I get bored in 3 days.
Yeah. But that's the trick of it, that you're kind of doing something, but you are not really doing, and that's well,
I think we can. I've heard Rinpoche, Rinpoche Rinpoche saying things like, just be just sit, relax, and be aware. You can keep your eyes open, you hear, you see, but instead of, can I say, there's a quality of just looking that is different from conceptualizing. The difference is subtle. I live by the sea, and this whole few months the weather was fantastic. So every afternoon I go on my walk, I sit in front of the sea, and I just sit there, But I realized I could see the seagulls flying and, the waves, and in the afternoon, because it's turned west, so the sun is over the sea, so you see the whole reflection on the surface is beautiful. But there's a way where there's different levels. There's a way where you sit, but you're not seeing anything. You're just in your mind. What shall I do? This person, they always have to send an email to me now, or something like that. It goes on. Then there's a way where there's there's another situation where you're sitting, you're not that much in your mind, not like that, but you're still observing. You see the seagull is flying there, and then, oh, it's so beautiful. And then, you see what I mean? And then there's a third way where you're just observing. It's beautiful, but you don't think like, oh my God, it's so beautiful. It's just what it is. And you're seeing, you're hearing, but you are in a much more relaxed state. You're not putting everything into boxes with labels, So this is already something that can approach this idea of just sitting, where you don't have the impression, because when you go even further, whether in Dzogchen or Mahamud, they will tell you, don't meditate, because meaning don't conceptualize that you're doing something special.
Yes.
Just be natural. But again, it is the most difficult thing is to be natural. It's amazing. The other day, I was watching my mind, and I got to this point where, there was a little bit of a letting go of the sense of, there was a beginning of letting go of the sense of observer. And then there was something in my mind that said, oh, but if I let go, then I completely lose control over the perceptions. I realized that I'm a control freak. Oh my God. Because the sense of an observer also means that there is somebody who is also controlling, some way, maybe not controlling, but that's what they call grasping. You're grasping into the sounds or whatever your perceptions are as an external entity that grasps to something else different, So there's many levels, but what I think is above all is relax. and every time we feel like we are going into a thought or a chain of thoughts or whatever, just relax, let go. And the more we manage to relax, the closer we get to this, when the expression of resting in the nature of mind is very inspiring, I find, because it's the true rest. There's nothing else that compares to that, But at the same time, it's getting to the point where that is more interesting, or that is more appealing than following the patterns. And the reason also why we in retreat is easier, because you have less distraction. And as with any other mental pattern, the more you act it, the stronger it is. So if you start being so distracted, then you get less distracted, less and less, because those patterns become less and less active. And so it becomes easier and easier to not be swayed by them, and just being able to be more comfortable in a more open and less conceptualized way of being. It's all about training. It's all about training. There's nothing, because this is our nature. We don't have to fabricate anything, or we don't have to create another personality or go into deep or hardships, or in a sense we do. Maybe it helps, but in a sense we don't, because it's already there. So the more we can simplify, and the more we can relax, and the more we can decomplexify our lives, the better. If we have lots of appointments, lots of things to do, then it sort of activates all these patterns of being constantly busy in our minds. If we simplify that, then naturally, the interest for all of that sort of wanes down, and then just being able to relax. I think also maybe just not during there's formal meditation, and that is very necessary. Some people sometimes say, oh yeah, but can I do my garden instead? Or yes, you can do your garden in a meditative way, but not instead. We definitely need the formal meditation, because that's what trains us into this sort of more aware of meditative awareness or something. But then in little moments here and there during the day, we can do, just 1 second or a few seconds of this openness. Then we go back into our activities. But these few seconds here and there keep maintaining. Our mind is so used to be restless that the being quiet and being relaxed is not so appealing to it. But if we give it small moments, several times, then it might be good. I sometimes feel like maybe this doesn't appeal too much to you or make sense to you, but when you live in a hot country and in the summer, and you've been walking in the sun, and you're very hot, and you're sweating all over, and you get to a shady place where there's some water running and some coolness, and you sit down and you say, this is so good, you know what I mean? In that moment, you're not thinking about anything. It's just so relaxing being there. It's only a few seconds. Then you start thinking again, but it's that feeling of, And the Tibetans often give this image of somebody who has been working in the fields all day and then gets home and feels like he has done everything that he was supposed to do for the day, and now he can relax. Something like that, And those things are very simple, but it can bring our mind to be more comfortable with, and more and make these moments of relaxation more appealing than just running into our phone or something like that and keeping our mind busy. Okay. Any comment or question or something?
Joo, siis jäin pohtimaan sitä aikoinaan lukemaan ja sanonut sitä kirjasta, joka on nykyään kirjattu niin siellä sanottiin näin, Näkemisessä vain näkeminen. Kuulemisessa vain kuuleminen. Hajussa haju. Mausta vain maku. Ja kosketuksessa vain kosketus. Siis mitään lisäämättä eikä pois ottamatta.
Onko kysymystä vai onko?
Ajattelin vain sanoa, että tuollainen tilanne hänellä mahtoi olla siellä merenrannalla. Sitäkö hän kuvasi? Näkemisestä vain näkemistä.
She had been reading a book by
Santaraksita. I understand that part.
Santaraksita was writing that in seeing there is only seeing, in hearing there's only hearing, in tasting there's only
Tasting and so forth.
Was your experience on the beach a little bit like that?
Yeah, that's it. Seeing is just seeing. It's not seeing the seagulls flying through the sky. It's just seeing. And there's enjoyment in that, whatever it is. That's the thing. Of course, if you're sitting in front of the sea and seeing, it's very beautiful. So yeah, but if you're looking at something else, just in seeing, there is this relaxation of seeing is just seeing. Yeah, that's an important point, because sometimes we think that when we talk about resting in the nature of mind, we should go into some sort of blank state where there's nothing. It's not true. It's not nothing. Resting in the nature of mind is seeing is just seeing, and hearing is just hearing, and even thoughts are just thoughts. But we don't grasp into making them things and elaborating on them. So any sensation and anything that comes is just what it is. Yeah, it's subtle, because it's a fraction of second. In the beginning, we're just seeing, and the next moment, and we don't see how one goes to the other, but in the next moment, we are grasping. But that's it. I find this fascinating. It's better than Netflix. Not that I don't like Netflix, but it's fascinating. We can think it's boring, but it's not. It's you learn so much about how our mind functions and how we get caught, and we get caught in the same place where there's so much freedom that is possible. And then, so yeah, that's it. Good point. Any other question?
I think Paldron wants to ask.
Okay.
Yes, Tsering, it just occurred to me. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can everyone else hear me? I don't know.
I will repeat the question, but yeah.
No, it just occurred to me. It's not really a question, but it's sometimes you read about the great Mahasiddhis used to go to the charnel grounds. So they used to go to a place that is extremely challenging and unpleasant in order to practice what you've just been talking about. And it occurs to me that we should really, it's not easy, but when we encounter unpleasant circumstances, that's a very great opportunity to maybe try and practice this, the witness thing, where you're just experiencing what's happening without reacting. Because it occurs to me there's many places now, as we know, in the world where the circumstances are dire. So it's easy when you're on a beach and it's beautiful.
Definitely.
If you're in a very unpleasant situation, so maybe sometimes we should go to places that are unpleasant to practice.
Of course, yeah. Of course, yeah. Definitely. I mean, the poor Mahasiddhas, they had to go to charnel grounds. We don't need to go that far. we can find unpleasant circumstances right by the door.
Yeah.
But yes, that's the thing. Yeah, sure. We should train with both pleasant and unpleasant circumstances to be able to just see what's there to see and hear what's there to hear. And
yeah, I mean, even like sort of like unpleasant family situations or whatever, you know, which happen all the time.
Well, if you, like they say in Tibetan, if you want to know how realized you are, go spend a week with your family. Go home for the Americans would say, what's the celebration is Thanksgiving. Yeah, go home for Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Well, that is even more challenging because it's not just about being unpleasant, like going to a charnel ground. Going to a family reunion will stir up, most probably, lots of emotions. It's more in that sense. It's that depends on the families, of course. But yeah, sure. That's it. And we have a whole life to train into being able to just see and hear and be in unpleasant situations, because that's what we have most. But then that is actually the training for life and also for death. It's being able to remain as close as possible with the simplest way of perceiving things, and without grasping at them, and not too many opinions, and not thinking about how things should be, but just rest with the things as they are. That's the training, we would say. But then in Tibetan Buddhism, fortunately, we have lots of techniques, and there's lots of meditation techniques or practices, different practices that can help us getting there, you know. Again, it's a bit like I was saying at lunch, we were talking about this. It's true, we start with very simple meditation, then sometimes if we go to the Vajrayana meditations, some of them are extremely complicated with lots of deities and attributes and things like this, and mantras and all of that. And then to go back to a very simple thing, when we approach Mahamudra or Dzogchen, we go back to actually shamatha in a very simple way, but then now our mind is much more relaxed because we were able to, all these methods of the Vajrayana that seem to make it more complicated, actually act as antidotes to our own conceptual complications. So it's like untying the knot by giving a counter knot, say something like that. And in the end, the knot is undone. And then the mind is more relaxed, and we grasp less to the appearances. And so it is easier to, again, remain in the nature of mind, and it's less appealing to just follow again another thought about something that we have thought thousands of times, and sort of get tired of that. So this is about the Bardo of dying, and we ended up talking about meditation again, but that's not the idea, you know. When we talk about practicing, and then I just looked at you and reminded that we had this conversation at lunch also. Sometimes it's not clear what we mean, what is supposed to be our practice, especially if we just followed one teacher our whole life, we probably have a sort of, perhaps not, but we have a certain style, or we have even a progression. Some teachers now give, you start with the Nyondro, and then you do that, and then you do something else. I'm talking about Tibetan teachers, of course. But if you have which is the case for most people in most centers, yes, you follow a teacher, but you also receive teachings from somebody comes and gives a teaching about Poa, and then somebody comes and gives a teaching about Bodhicitta, and then somebody comes and gives a teaching about Tonglen or training a mind or whatever. And then at some point we then sort of sometimes become a bit confused. What should I do? What is really the practice? Is the practice ethical? Is the practice meditation? Is the practice reciting mantras? Should I think about Guru Rinpoche, or should I practice Tonglen? Or so it's not easy. People in the beginning think, and often I'm asked that question: how can I start learning Buddhism? And I'm always at odds with that because I don't know what to say. It's not like you should first do this and then do that and that. It's not that easy. It's sort of much more fluid thing. In the end, I think what really matters is what helps us transform. And that might be different for each one of us. You know, for some people, the Vajrayana is just incomprehensible gibberish. What's that all about deities and, ways of light, and who are they, those deities? Where do they come from? I thought Buddhism was non-theist, so what is all of that? For other people, they love the mantras and these sort of esoteric things, and visualizing themselves as dakinis, or 6 arms, 4 legs, 2 wings, wrathful deities. And for other people, it's just Lojong or Tonglen or all this mind training this is Buddhism, this makes sense. I can deal with it. So we're all different. And the good thing about it is every one of these techniques works, but it may not work for everybody. Every one of these techniques is very skillful, but again, it might not work for everybody. So that doesn't really answer the question, right? Because you still don't know. There's no definite really answer to that. I think it's really about, one has to find in oneself what works best at that moment, with the comprehension and the understanding and the experience that we have at that time.
Perhaps my question was also, like, in the moment, because we get this advice that the most important thing is to practice now. And then there's this story about that Rinpoche often says that somebody is meditating. First perhaps reciting mantras, and somebody comes, that's very good, but shouldn't you do real Dharma practice? And then they go and study the sutras. Nothing, is Dharma practice. So what is Dharma practice? The story doesn't tell you that.
Yeah, exactly. I was wondering, does the story tell you what? Well, yeah, I see. I've heard that story many times.
Yes,
but
very nice. And another story that I'm sort of bouncing now, but the other one was that somebody was meditating on compassion, and somebody came and said, what are you doing? Meditating on compassion. And then the 6th time or something, like, oh, meditating on compassion, This is sort of like similar thing, that you are not really, doing the practice, even though at first you think you are meditating on compassion, then you get that distraction for the 10th time, and you're like, ah.
Right. You're about to shoot the person.
Yeah.
So. Yeah. Well, it is a very legitimate question. But what I think about that specifically in the first story about what are you doing? You're not circumambulating, but
Yes.
yeah, it would be better if you
It's
do
some Dharma
real
practice.
Dharma practice. And then it goes on like this. I think it addresses the fact that it's when we think about practice as what Rinpoche refers to sometimes as a job or as a form of work or something like that.
Yes.
It's the moment you conceptualize what you're doing, thinking, now I'm doing a Dharma practice, compared or in parallel or how do you say?
Or separate from your life.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because then you are compartmentalizing things.
Yes.
So this is Dharma practice and this is ordinary life.
Yeah.
And that's what is not supposed to be. It is supposed to, we are supposed to, it's not like we are supposed to, but if we really want to, that the practice really mingles with our lives, with our being, so that we really can transform, everything has to be seen within the framework of a practice. So waking up in the morning, taking up the bus, going to work, getting upset, bringing up your children, sitting for meditation, everything should be included, and not like now I am circumambulating around the stupa, so I'm doing Dharma practice, but now I sit and watch Netflix, so I'm not doing Dharma practice. You see, I'm taking a break from a Dharma practice. It's more the idea that anything that we can experience, since we can't experience anything outside our mind, so everything that we are experiencing goes through our mind. So and what we're doing is training our mind. So anything that we experience can become a way to train our mind. And that's when you don't see too much a difference between Dharma practice and something that wouldn't be a Dharma practice. So that's why sometimes it is said that what you do between sessions is almost more important than what we do in the session. I wouldn't go that far, except for the fact that there are more hours between sessions than the hours that we spend in formal meditation. So from that point of view, it is more important because it's more frequent. We spend more time doing other things. But it's just to say, I think, that everything should be a sort of a continuum of experience. It doesn't mean that you have to walk in meditation or drive in meditation or things like this, but there should be a little awareness, at least, not in the same way as you sit. That's why we need formal meditation, because we put ourselves in a situation where we don't need to respond to anything for a period of time. So we reduce, what happens is our mental consciousness, well, there are different levels of consciousness. Our mental consciousness can only process one thing at a time. So if it's hearing, if it's processing hearing, it can't see. And if you're seeing, you can't taste. And if you're tasting, you can't sense or whatever. And imagine how many bits of information come at the same time when we are awake and talking or going about. And our mental consciousness goes like crazy to try to, respond to every single thing that is happening. And that is the main reason why even the misunderstanding that there might be something, some experiencer which is separated from that, meaning the illusion of ego comes from not seeing clearly. And we don't see clearly because our mind is running like crazy, trying to, tackle all these things at the same time. So that's why that's why we need meditation, reducing the number of information that is arriving at the same time, so that our mental consciousness can get some clarity and can get some respite, just okay. That is why also the question that somebody sometimes is asked about, should we meditate with our eyes closed or our eyes open? In the beginning, it's important, maybe important if you feel that way, to meditate with your eyes closed, because that reduces the number of the amount of information you get, so your mind can get quieter. So that's why we need formal meditation, is to give our mind a little respite. And because of that, when we are in those circumstances, then we can be more into the awareness and the spaciousness than if we are driving, for instance, because we still have to, even if it's automatic, we really still have to be aware of the car coming or the person crossing the road or anything. But even if we can't really be in the same state of deep meditation while driving, we can still be in the awareness, in a more aware state. What I would say is, like, compared to the normal state of wakedness, like when we are going about, the meditative awareness in daily life is like a little more spacious than habitually, like ordinarily. Meaning, like, there is some space around the fact of looking at Mina. I'm not just looking at her in the ordinary perception. When I look at her, that's only that. And all my focus and all my awareness is captured into looking at her. But in the awareness state, there's a little more space. There's sort of extra space around that. You understand what I mean? It's more like, it's like my awareness is bigger than my seeing her. It's like surrounded by space. And that is something we can have in doing anything. It doesn't prevent us from being efficient in whatever we're doing. On the contrary, we'll be even more. But at the same time, we're not totally caught, like sucked into the thing that we are doing or watching or seeing or whatever. So we can watch TV in that state, or we can do anything, like in the story Rinpoche often talks about, can I meditate when I smoke? That was the two Zen monks, you know the story, no? Two Zen monks, and they're kind of beginners. So one of them catches the other one smoking outside the monastery. And he says, you can't smoke, huh? And he said, well, I asked the abbot, and he said I could. And the monk said, oh, no, I asked, and he said I couldn't. So the one that is smoking says, well, it depends, how did you ask? And then let me see if I remember correctly. I asked, can I smoke when I meditate? And the abbot said no. And he said, yeah. And the other one who is smoking said, yes, that's why, because I asked, can I meditate when I smoke? So that's it. We can meditate, even smoking. But probably we will end up like Nagarjuna's disciple, dropping it, because then, and it's actually true. This is a bit of a side thing, but there are now many. One friend of a friend was trying to quit smoking, and then she got to this program where actually what they were doing, they were trying to put people into a more meditative state and then make them smoke in that state. They couldn't go beyond one puff. It was so disgusting. when you're driven by habit, you don't really know what you're doing. But if you stop and get into the more aware state, then you realize how disgusting it is. But if you switch into the habitual mode, you will go again and you will not even notice the taste, the smell. And so that's how they make people stop smoking. So that's what I was saying. If you really meditate while you're smoking, you probably stop because it's so disgusting. Like Nagarjuna's thief. If I'm aware, I can't smoke, and if I smoke, I can't be aware. There's a point where this can't go along. It can't go together.